Hey guys, Nick here with What Game Now, and we had a request on one of our recent videos, the North versus South 150 point battle, to go through and talk about force construction, Heavy Gear Blitz, and how it works, because it's not quite play whatever you want. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do in this video. So, before we get going, I want to preface this with saying that Heavy Gear Blitz list construction is very flexible. It's not like a lot of other games. Instead, you have your squads or combat groups are organized based off of role, as opposed to this is a squad of X type of troop. So because of that, there's simultaneously more rules but less rules at the same time. There's more rules that give you more flexibility to do things. So what I've done here is I've got a little piece of paper here, and I went ahead and printed this out so you guys can visually see what we're doing as we walk through this. And one of the first things you need to do when you build a force is you need to figure out how many threat value you're going to be using. In this case, we're going to build to 150 threat value. That's about the high-end standard for a casual game. If you play other miniatures games, it's equivalent to about 2,000 points of Warhammer 40k, a 300-point Infinity game, a 75-point War Machine, for example. And we're going to be building using the new Coalition faction. These are important because the threat value, the way that works is if you imagine a salary cap in professional sports. The idea is every player is paid appropriate to their ability, so really good players are really expensive. And in order to prevent somebody from just taking all the best things, all of the teams have an identical cap on the total salary of all their players. The idea is this creates a sense of something approaching equality. And that's what this does here. Every model is going to have a threat value, and if you add all the threat values together of all the models in your force and any upgrades you've taken, it cannot exceed this number. It can equal this. It can be 150 threat value, that's fine. It can be less than 150 threat value, that's also fine. There's no advantage to going lower, but you absolutely cannot go higher than that. The faction, in this case this is New Coalition, is going to tell you where you can draw your models from. You can only field models from the same faction in a force unless some other rule tells you otherwise. And there are some cases. The Allies rule, for example, is a really good one. Now, this force here is divided into combat groups. All of them are. The combat groups are the combat groups are the thing you're going to alternate activating in game. And each combat group, so I have combat groups 1, 2, 3 groups. This is a fourth one, it's just a placeholder. There's no minimum and there's no maximum on the number of combat groups you can field. But you can see here, each combat group is going to compose of two components, a primary unit and a secondary unit. And all of the models belong to one of these units. So, let's go ahead and talk about these different units here and then build up to our combat groups. A primary unit must contain 4 to 6 actions. That means all the models included in the unit. If you add up all their actions characteristics, it must be at least 4 and no more than 6. It must have a UA. So every primary unit must have a unit availability assigned to it, such as general purpose, strike, or fire support. All models in the unit must have that UA. We're going to go through an example here, but this primary unit right here, consisting of these 4 models, has the general purpose, or GP, UA. What that means is all the models in this unit must have that UA. This is essentially your squad type. Additionally, there is a 0 to 2 limit on each type of model that you can have. Now, this extends to variants as well. So, for example, these 4 models here, I have a Chasseur CV, a Chasseur Grenadier, and a Chasseur Gunner. These 2 models, the CV is an upgrade, we'll get to those later, are the same thing. They are Chasseurs, which is different from a Chasseur Gunner, which is different from a Chasseur Grenadier. Every model is limited to no more than 2 copies in a primary unit. Now there is an exception. Some models, if you look at their unit availability codes, have a plus next to them. The Chasseur here is a really good example. It has UA GP+. The plus just means you can ignore this limit for just that one specific model. So the base Chasseur here, I could have 6 of these in one group. But I could only have, I'm sorry, that's the commander. I can only have 2 gunners, and I can only have up to 2 grenadiers. Now, that's pretty well it for your limitations on your primary unit. Your secondary unit's going to work the same way, with 2 exceptions. It can only have half the actions of the primary unit rounded up. So if your primary unit only has 4 actions in it, the secondary unit can include up to 2. There is no minimum, so that means the secondary unit isn't actually required. If you have 5 to 6 actions, this may include up to 3 actions worth of models. It must have a UA as well, and there's a 0 to 1 limit instead of 0 to 2. Now that we have our units put together, note that there's 1 primary and 1 secondary unit in each combat group. The secondary unit is optional. We must select 1 model from the primary unit to be the combat group leader. It's going to be the squad leader, essentially. They must be from the primary unit. There are no restrictions on what can be a combat group leader. It's a free upgrade, it just makes you a commander model. Now, there is one catch. If you have a CMD UA. So these are command variant models. The Chasseur CV here is a command model. Voltiger Hammer's CV right here is a command model also. They have the CMD in their UA code. All that says is if they are included in the unit, they must be the commander. Now, there's some implications of that. You can't have command units in the secondary unit because a commander can never be in a secondary unit. Command models must always be commanders. So there's some consequences of that. But if you have a model with the command UA, it must be the combat group leader or another commander model. It is possible to have multiple commanders in the same group. But if you have the command UA, it must be the commander. If you don't have a model with a command UA, anything is allowed. That's actually it. You go through and you build primary and secondary unit combat groups, and you do so until you stop with your points. Now there are some other things we can do. So first off, there's an option for upgrades. Any primary unit in your army can take standard upgrades. The upgrades are limited to 1 copy of each upgrade per combat group, but you can have it over every combat group. So this group can take an upgrade for their primary unit. Every other primary unit can take that same upgrade. You just can't take the same upgrade twice on the same unit. These include things like hand grenades, Panzerfausts, things like that. Second, you can nominate 1 primary unit in your force to be veterans. If they're veterans, they can purchase the veteran trait. It's a 2 threat value upgrade, and it gives you a skill point. Now, in addition to that, you can also make your force, those models can also purchase what are called veteran upgrades. Any model with the veteran trait has access to a unique set of upgrades. So this guy right here, this Arbalstrier, is a veteran. It has access to its own upgrades, even though it's not in a primary unit. And then there are command upgrades, which are the CV upgrade on this, and some other options. We're not going to go through all those in quite intricate detail. This is more of a how it works. The last thing you can do before we go on is make what's called an elite force. An elite force lets you make every unit in your army veterans at the cost of some additional restrictions. And then lastly, there are options to create what are called duelists. You can see these in some of our battle reports. As of the time of the filming of this unreleased Caprice versus Nucol battle report is going to include a duelist. But duelists are pseudo characters. They're highly customizable, and you can do what you want with them. And not quite do what you want with them, but you can make a very powerful character out of them. So let's go ahead and walk through this force, keeping these rules in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and remove these. We're going to put them back as we recreate them. So let's start with Combat Group 1. We must have a primary unit, and it must contain at least 4 actions and models. So what I did is I selected a Chasseur CV, a Chasseur Gunner, and a Chasseur Grenadier. Now, this is, oh, by the way, I forgot, this is a general purpose primary unit. So we selected a UA. That tells us what models we can include. These are all models that have the general purpose UA, so long as I have at least 4 actions when I'm done. Now, a couple notes here. Because of this limitation, I could include 1 more gunner and or 1 more grenadier. I can't include 2 more gunners because it would put me over this limit. Similarly, these chasseurs have a little plus next to them with the GP UA. That tells you that they're unlimited. There's no limit to the number of chasseurs you can take in a combat group. That's general, or in a unit that's general purpose. But I do want to point something out here. Even though this model got upgraded, it still counts as what it originally was for this limitation. So instead of being a Chasseur CV, let's pretend this was a Chasseur Gunner CV instead. So I'd have 2 Chasseur Gunners. I couldn't include a 3rd one, even though this one's been upgraded to be a command variant. So I have at least 4 actions and no more than 6. I have a UA. I've abided by the 0 to 2 limit. I need to elect a combat group leader. If I have any command models, that must be them. And I do. The Chasseur CV right here is a command model. So this must be the combat group leader. There are no other choices. To go with this primary unit, I have added a strike secondary unit. Must have a UA like the other one. The only catch is, because this has 4 actions, this can include up to 2, half the actions of its associated unit, with the restriction that you can only have 1 of each type of model. I have chosen an Arbalest Strider Demolisher to fill that void. Next combat group over here, I elected to make the primary unit fire support, and there is no secondary unit. I have a Voltigeur Hammer CV and 2 mortar teams. This is 3 actions. Each of these are 1 for a total of 5. So I've met this requirement. I have a UA, it's fire support. All of these models have the FS UA. I have abided by the 0 to 2 limit wherever it's appropriate. I need to elect a combat group leader. I do have a command model. The tank is upgraded to a command tank. That's what CV means in New Coalition terms. So this is going to be my combat group leader right there. Interesting squad. It's a tank leading some mortar teams. And like I said, there's no secondary unit. You're not obligated to have one. You must have a primary unit. You do not have to have a secondary unit. Last up, I went ahead and grabbed another fire support group with no secondary unit. This group contains 2 Chevaliers, 1 action each, and 2 Jerboa sentries, 1 action each. I have a total of 4 actions, so this is legal. These all have the FSUA, which is what the unit has, so this has been met. I don't have more than 2 of any particular variant. Now, I could include more Jerboas, more of these guys, but they cannot be the Jerboa Sentry variant, which is the one with this little satellite right there. Your other options are Jerboa Fists, Jerboa Flashes, and generic Jerboas. I could include all of those, just no more sentries. Now, I must select a combat group leader. Unlike the other groups, there is no command model in this group. So any of them are valid choices. Tactically, you're going to want to pick one of the two Jerboas. Side note before I forget, don't build this army. It's not amazing. It's not terrible, but I mean, don't take this as a good army to build. This is just illustrative. So that concludes our combat group here. We've met all the requirements. And if you've been following along at home, oh, combat group leader, we'll make it this guy. If you've been following along at home, I've spent 135 threat value in total. Now, I could stop there. There's no reason I'm obligated to go further, but there's no advantage to not filling out that remaining 15 threat value. So let's go ahead and fill in some upgrades. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to look at my primary units, and I can give them upgrades. We're going to let's give this primary unit here. There is an option for under the standard upgrades in section, I believe it's 13.2. Lists all the standard upgrades. I'm going to purchase the Panzerfaust upgrades for this unit and give them to these two Jerboas. So it's a light Panzerfaust. You choose it once per unit. You can select 2 models in the unit to purchase a light Panzerfaust for 1 threat value. So now I'm up to 137. Now, I can't redo this again for the same squad. I can purchase light Panzerfausts for the other 2 units, but I cannot do it again for this squad because the upgrades are limited to once per unit. I'm going to go ahead and purchase a command upgrade over here and make this Chasseur CV a commanding officer. That is a 3 threat value upgrade. Makes him a slightly better commander. That's only usable on combat group leaders. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and nominate a veteran unit. We're going to make this unit here veterans. That lets them purchase the veteran trait for 2 threat value each. So 1, 2, 3 units. They don't all have to purchase it. They all have the chance to purchase it. I'm going to go ahead and make it all of them. So that's 146 threat value, 2 each, 246. You could, in this case, I could just make the tank a veteran and leave them not veterans. That's totally fine. And then lastly, I'm going to use a duelist. Now, duelists are a little weird. You pick a single model. It must be a gear. It must be in a secondary unit. And it must be the only model in that secondary unit. Conveniently, my Arbalstrier fits that. Now, the duelist has the must purchase the veteran trait if it doesn't already have it. The Arbalstrier actually already does. It has the veteran trait as per standard. And it gains the lead by example rule, which basically says if it damages something, nearby guys get a skill point. And it can purchase upgrades unique to being a duelist. So let's go ahead and spend the remaining points here. I have 4 threat value to spend. Let's go ahead and we got a lot of choices here. So what we can do for our remaining 4 threat value here, all these 4 models here, the Arbalstrier, Voltiger, Hammer, CV, and the 2 mortar teams are all veterans. So they have access to the veterans upgrade list. Even though he's in a secondary unit, he could do that. And then in addition to that, the Arbalstrier has access to the duelist upgrades. So at this point, we could spend 4 threat value to do whatever we want. Let's go ahead and make... We'll give this guy a duelist upgrade called Crackshot. So we're at 149. Makes him a little more accurate. And then I have 1 threat value left. Let's go ahead and give this infantry team field armor to fill out our remaining points. This is a veteran upgrade. This is a duelist upgrade. I'm at 150 threat value if you add together all the model and upgrade costs. So we're actually finished. We now have an army. And we're good to go and ready to go for battle. To quickly walk through it again, our first combat group, contains a general purpose primary unit and a fire support secondary unit. The primary unit is a chasseur CV who's been upgraded to a commanding officer, a chasseur grenadier, and a chasseur gunner. A Arblastrier is in the secondary unit. It has been acknowledged as the force's duelist. It already has the veteran trait, so there's no need to purchase that, and it has taken the crackshot upgrade for its rocket launcher. Our next combat group is a Voltiger Hammer CV, who is the combat group leader. I forgot, the CV over here is the combat group leader, with 2 mortar teams. This particular primary unit has been upgraded to veterans, and this infantry unit has field armor. All 3 models have gained the veteran trait, and there is no secondary unit. And then we have a combat group over here, fire support primary unit. One of the Jerboa sentries is the combat group leader, and both Jerboa sentries have been upgraded with a light Panzerfaust. Again, no secondary unit. So this force is actually ready for battle. Not sure how especially well it would do, but that wasn't the purpose of this video. So I know this looks like a lot of information, and sometimes you gotta play around with it. There is an advantage to this system in that it's highly flexible. You can really play around a lot with this. For example, I don't actually need this mortar team. I could cut that, and that's still a perfectly legal combat group because the tank's got 3 actions. That'd free up some upgrade space. There's some tactical considerations to be made. 2 fire support groups here is a little bit questionable because of objectives. But on the whole, that's it, guys. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. Or go ahead and shoot us a message or something like that. Like and subscribe if you already haven't. And I will catch you guys on the next one.
Hey, this is Dave. If you like what we're doing here at What Game Now, go ahead and click on one of the videos which should be on either side of me, or click right in the middle and go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the bell once you subscribe so that you know when we have new videos. Please go ahead and share us with your friends. Let everybody know that we're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for all of our subscribers already. And we look forward to bringing you more content every chance that we get.